Moon Knight's first season is over, but that doesn't mean we've seen the last of the character. Or I mean the last of the characters?
Yeah, maybe not.
We have 3 known personalities inhabiting Marc Spector's body, and Oscar Isaac is just too good to not return. But the question becomes not only where will he show up next, but also who will he team up with? I think the next step of the character is to pair him up with another MCU character, and there's a lot of options to choose from. Doctor Strange, Blade, Spider-Man, I'm talking about them all, so let's get started right now. So the first team up I would want to see is Moon Knight with Doctor Strange. I mean, Moon Knight's finale aired the same week as the premiere of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so it's a match made in heaven. But really, how and why would this team up work? Well, there is comic precedence for this, with Doctor Strange and Moon Knight both operating in the Midnight Suns, a group which has recently gained a lot of traction as the most requested team up to see next in the MCU. And I also remember one specific sequence where during the Age of Khonshu storyline, Moon Knight beats Doctor Strange by basically throwing a bunch of zombies at him. Not sure how to adapt that in the MCU, but I know it would be cool. Anyways, I just like how both of these characters operate in a bit of a trippy environment. Moon Knight really started to explore the fractured mind of Marc Spector, as well as the afterlife, while Strange truly leaned into the strange during Multiverse of Madness. If the master of the mystic arts had to deal with ancient Egyptian deities and legitimate mental illness, then what does that look like? Plus, I just like the pairing of a magic user with a more straightforward brawler. Sure, Strange teaming up with Wong is fun, but it's just magic teaming up with magic. I want to see some variety. And as a final note, I want to see someone as arrogant as Strange interact with a legit moon god. That'd be fun. Out of all the team-ups on this list, I think this one makes the most sense. We know Blade is coming to the MCU. We heard his voice in the Eternals in a Nick Fury-esque moment where he seems to be recruiting the Black Knight.
Sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?
And if I were Blade and had my own personal list of people I want to recruit for my new team, I'd just get all the knights I could find. First, the Black Knight, and then Moon Knight. But although we don't know what Blade's whole deal is in the MCU, I think it's pretty safe to assume vampires will be involved. I mean, he is a vampire hunter. It would be strange if vampires don't exist in our universe. And because Moon Knight has experience with mummies now, why not just keep him in the world of the occult by having him fight vampires as well? I also think this would just be an interesting character conflict. Like, Blade probably likes beheading vampires, right? And Khonshu is all about enacting his own brand of justice after someone has done something wrong. But what happens if someone is turned into a soulless vampire monster? I imagine Blade and Khonshu would be on the same page and quickly decide to stake the vampire in the heart, but someone like Stephen Grant would push to save these people from this curse. And hey, side note, if teaming Moon Knight up with Blade somehow leads to the enactment of the famous doctored meme where Moon Knight calls Dracula a nerd and asks for money, then I'd be a very happy man. So I mentioned him briefly before, but now I'll suggest that Moon Knight and the Black Knight team up on an adventure. Yes, part of this decision is mainly because I'm imagining a super cool marketing logo of a Marvel Knights TV show of some sort, but there's more to it than that. From what we saw in Eternals, Dane Whitman is a bit of an inexperienced everyday dude who's about to get his life turned upside down with his mysterious family history leading to the Ebony Blade. I think he's going to be a tad bit overwhelmed, and I think he'd bond with someone like Stephen Grant. But hey, listen to this. I actually think Steven and Dane would already know each other. Okay, so I did some obsessive digging. In Eternals, Dane is a history professor and scientist at London's Natural History Museum. Steven is an ancient Egyptian history enthusiast who works at a building that may be called something else, but is clearly the National Gallery in London. And those two buildings are 10 minutes away from each other. You're telling me these two history lovers wouldn't have at least a passing knowledge of one another? I mean, sure, Steven only worked at the gift shop, but he had to learn his knowledge from somewhere, right? I'm just saying they would go to the same social parties. In the comics, Moon Knight and Spider-Man have a very long history together. It's because they both normally operate in New York. Obviously, the Moon Knight TV show was a more globe-trotting adventure mainly set in London and Egypt, but there was a reference how Mark did some mercenary Moon Knight work in the Big Apple. And if the show got renewed for a season 2, it would be neat to see the character settle into New York to start developing his 3 personalities. Like, I know Mark and Steven now have to work things out with the violent Jake Lockley, but in the comics, there's a really really cool element to Marc's personalities, all rubbing elbows with different social classes of New York. Steven is normally the billionaire, Marc is the main fighter, and Jake is the cab driver. That would be great to see come to life in New York City and give Moon Knight a chance to meet up with everyone's favorite neighborhood Spider-Man. Through all these team-ups I'm listing, I'm obviously excited for seeing them fight together, but looking deeper, I'd love to see what Moon Knight can learn from these characters and vice versa. For instance, Spider-Man is probably having an identity crisis right now. He's completely erased his Peter Parker side and just mainly focused on the Spider-Man persona. And maybe someone like Moon Knight, who now knows the value of working with your other persona rather than just burying it, could help convince the webhead that his Peter Parker side is just as important as his Spider-Man side. Plus, on a fun note, I think Peter would be really confused to see Marc switching to Steven for conversations. When Moon Knight was first announced, there were many who said this would be the MCU's answer to the Deadpool type of character. And that's sort of true, I guess. In the comics, Moon Knight is this chaotic force of random energy who talks to himself and switches personalities in such a way that confuses everyone around him. And he's also a little violent, much like the Merc with the mouth. But now that the Moon Knight show is out and we're slowly moving toward an official Deadpool 3 announcement, I think instead of having Moon Knight be the MCU's Deadpool, the two should team up with one another for an adventure. Like, they would never do this, but imagine if Deadpool hears that the MCU is introducing Moon Knight as a replacement for him, and he sets out to travel the multiverse in order to eliminate Moon Knight and take his place. But then, through wacky hero shenanigans, the two team up together to take on a bigger threat. Again, that's too wild, but I just want to see how these characters work together. Would Wade want to be an Egyptian god's avatar and try to find someone like Khonshu? Would Wade and Marc bond over both being mercenaries? Or would Deadpool try to coax out even more personalities to talk to? Again, these two are so chaotic that maybe they should never meet up, but I think it would be crazy fun. I think on the surface, a Moon Knight and Daredevil team up would look awesome on a fight scene level. Both are excellent brawlers and martial artists and know how to crack some skulls in New York's seedy underbelly. So just on that alone, I'd love to see these two team up, especially with their costume choices. Seeing Daredevil and his darker red suit juxtaposed with Moon Knight's all-white costume is just a fun dynamic to think about. But there's something a little deeper here. The Moon Knight show really embraced the idea of all these different afterlives existing and confirming that there's not just one correct belief system. Well, what would happen when you pair up the Egyptian god Khonshu with Matt Murdock, a character who's usually portrayed as a very traditional Catholic? It would be a way to explore the concept of faith in a superhero world a bit more. You know, on top of all the bloody henchman bashing these two would do together. There's room for both. Alright, so I haven't really been addressing the elephant in the room. The Moon Knight show ended with Steven and Marc not realizing their third personality, Jake Lockley, was the more violent side of their persona, and was more than willing to be the type of avatar that Khonshu wanted. Just someone who's not afraid to eliminate the bad people and doesn't care about the collateral damage. I mean, unless all those orderlies at that hospital were secretly evil Hydra agents at the end, when Jake picked up Arthur Harrow, then it feels like Jake's a pretty bad guy. And I would want to see this more violent version of Moon Knight team up with the Punisher. Both aren't afraid to eliminate their enemies, and yes, while Punisher wouldn't take an innocent person's life like Lockley, I think these two would get along rather well in their crusade to wipe out bad people. Maybe a change of scenery is what Moon Knight needs, but somewhere that's not Europe or New York. Maybe somewhere a bit sunnier? That's right, I think Moon Knight needs a West Coast vacation, and while he's there, he might as well join the West Coast Avengers. The fun thing is that there's a whole plotline where he does this in the comics, so there's a lot of inspiration to draw from. In the comics, Moon Knight meets up with the group when their roster consists of Hawkeye, Wonder Man, Mockingbird, and Hank Pym. Now, I don't see the MCU using this roster for the West Coast Avengers, but I think we can make a solid team here. Okay, what if the West Coast Avengers consisted of Moon Knight, White Vision, Hawkeye, Scott Lang, or Wasp, or Stature? I think that's a fun and interesting team up. Yes, the Midnight Suns would be a team that would steer more toward the dark and gritty, but I do think Moon Knight is also capable of working on a more straightforward, heroic team. You know, if they get that Jake Lockley persona under control, that is. So I think this one is interesting. The Hawkeye TV show introduced us to Echo, who's getting her own spin-off show where presumably Kingpin is the bad guy. And in the comics, Echo and Moon Knight have a connection working together and even at one point get romantically involved. In the comics, Moon Knight is being his normal Moon Knight self. He's dressed up as Spider-Man looking for answers and finding out information about a new Kingpin, and accidentally blows the cover of Echo, who's undercover trying to do the same thing. Yes, I think Echo is more likely to team up with someone like Daredevil, but if the MCU really wanted to surprise us, they'd team up Echo with the Fist of Vengeance instead. Both of them would have complicated family issues to talk about and potentially bond over, which is an added benefit. And hey, if they wanted to gift us with something amazing, then maybe Echo, Daredevil, and Moon Knight all team up together as they hunt Kingpin just to see what happens. I say this in every team-up video, but I really think Yelena should team up with everyone. She's Phase 4's breakout character, and watching her be her sassy self while kicking a lot of butt has been a major treat so far. She's just a character who seems to work well with just about anyone, so how about she crosses paths with Moon Knight? Like, say Moon Knight is there in his Jake Lockley form to eliminate a Black Widow for being bad, but Yelena interferes as she's trying to unbrainwash all the bad Black Widows. Then there's conflict, and if somehow Yelena's magic serum that allows the brainwashed Black Widows to wake up and take agency over their bodies would somehow also work on Marc's body and allow him to wrestle control away from Jake Lockley, then that would be incredible. Plus, I also want to see a conversation between Yelena and Khonshu. That could be a whole movie in itself. I've talked about Moon Knight teaming up with one sorcerer in Doctor Strange, but what if Moon Knight instead sidestepped Stephen Strange and went straight to the Sorcerer Supreme? Wong is the Sorcerer Supreme of the MCU, and from the brief flashes we've seen of him, he has his fingers in a lot of pies. He's not only dealing with the training of new recruits, but he's also seemingly doing some government work of some sort. We saw in Shang-Chi that he's working with Abomination in some capacity, and could this eventually lead Wong to Moon Knight? I think that's possible. Or maybe Marc decides his connection with Khonshu needs to be severed using advanced mysticism, so in that case, if I were him, I'd turn to the Sorcerer Supreme for help. Maybe while Jake gleefully works for Khonshu, Marc tries to convince Wong to help separate that part of his mind from his body. Wong is a character who really seems like he could pop up anywhere, so I wouldn't be mad at it. So in the comics, Moon Knight's first appearance actually came in a Werewolf By Night issue where he was an adversary fighting the titular werewolf, and I think the MCU would be wise to mimic that in the near future. We know we're getting a Halloween special this year all about Werewolf By Night, which is a new form of storytelling for the MCU. But I mean, if that's the case, why wouldn't you want to bring in Moon Knight for a brief bit? Maybe Werewolf By Night is the star, and while he's trying to figure out this new lifestyle, an evil Jake Lockley shows up to eliminate him. That would not only tie into the original source material, but confirm that yes, Jake Lockley is still in control of the body when in Moon Knight form. And yeah, Moon Knight has already fought mummies, so why couldn't he also fight werewolves? So this one would be sort of a long shot, but I think Moon Knight teaming up with the new Black Panther would be fascinating. Sure, if Shuri becomes the new Black Panther, I don't know what this tech genius ruler Wakanda protector would talk about, if ever in a conversation with the three personalities inhabiting Marc Spector's body. But I think their histories are linked enough where I want to find out more. So Bast, the Panther goddess who everyone worships in Wakanda, was originally an Egyptian deity before Wakanda, so there's a good chance Khonshu and Bast know each other. I mean, they're all animal-based so far, right? So I guess it makes sense. Anyway, I think you could have a great juxtaposition between Moon Knight, who is the direct avatar of Khonshu, and the god can presumably take over the body if necessary, and Black Panther, who gets their powers through other means. Does this mean Bast could feasibly have an avatar of her own and instead chooses not to? So many questions. So I know I have some amazing team-ups here so far, but one of my last ones, I thought I'd just suggest Layla. Yes, Marc Spector, aka Stephen Grant, basically teamed up with Layla from the beginning, but we didn't see a whole lot of them fighting and working together. Like, sure, we got that final Moon Knight fight, but that seemed a little rushed and I want to see more. A lot of Layla's arc was her potentially becoming Moon Knight down the line, but I like this resolution more. It allows Marc to still be Moon Knight and for Layla to join in on the action and be her own superhero. So how would this work? Well, it seems like Marc went back to London and Layla presumably stayed in Egypt with her exclamation on how she's an Egyptian superhero. So maybe Moon Knight and Layla aren't together going forward and then are forced to team up again when a new threat arises? Or maybe Layla is the one to help Marc beat the Jake Lockley persona? I'm just saying, there's a lot that can happen. For my final entry, maybe the best person for Marc to team up with is himself. We know that Marc has serious issues, and it took him the whole first season to come up with a better working relationship with the Steven personality. But the finale threw a wrinkle into the mix with the introduction of Jake Lockley, and probably the best course of action for the next season would be seeing Marc and Steven try to work out a new arrangement with Lockley. That's probably a team-up that would be most beneficial for the character and would lay the groundwork for one of the many team-ups I mentioned here to happen. It would be hard for Marc to team up with anyone if he's at war with himself, right? Maybe Marc needs to just treat himself and work on his me time for a while, you know? I mean, it's probably too much to ask for to see Moon Knight team up with the Fox franchise's version of Apocalypse, right? I mean, sure, both have Egyptian roots, but you'd think Apocalypse would ask the question, hey, you sort of look like me. Better avoid that awkwardness. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.